Welcome to the Embracing You podcast with your host, Eric Pothen. We are all on our own unique journey to discovering ourselves. Each episode, I will help you navigate the journey within to reconnect with and discover the innate love you have for yourself. This podcast will cover topics from self-love to eating disorders and body image to mental health and to overall well-being. My goal is to help you honor and embrace yourself so you may live your most authentic life. Let's dive in. Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Embracing You podcast. I hope that you all have been well and have been taking care of yourselves. It's hard to believe summer is really coming to an end and fall is right around the corner. Today's episode features a very special guest, Daniel Hight, and here is just a little bit about him. After being diagnosed with incurable brain cancer in January 2021, he committed himself to giving back through founding More Than Our Story, helping to inspire others find their inner strength through sharing stories of everyday heroes, normalizing being vulnerable and breaking down barriers and stigmas around important topics, through articles educating and promoting a healthy and active lifestyle. He also set out on a renewed fitness journey and to embrace living life with cancer. You all, I'm really excited about this interview that we have today with Daniel. He does such a beautiful job of sharing his body story and also his journey with receiving this diagnosis of living with incurable brain cancer. And so I don't want to say too much more about what today's episode will hold, but without further ado, let's dive in. All right. Well, good morning, Daniel. How are you doing today?
Doing well, thank you, Eric. Yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, I have my coffee here. It's an important way to start, I feel like, most people's days. And I'm very excited to dive into our conversation that we're going to be having with one another.
Me too.
Awesome. So to start our time off together today, if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and your journey that actually led you to founding More Than Our Story.
Sure. So again, my name's Daniel Hight. I'm a husband, father, founder of More Than Our Story, as Eric just mentioned. Based in the Toronto area. So I've always been involved in team sports throughout my youth. And then as my career set off, as it commonly does, that kind of derailed. I stopped working out, got a little larger. I didn't really like what I was seeing in the mirror. I was working multiple jobs, mainly as a consultant in Toronto. I was overstressed, overworked. I was emotionally eating. I was unable to work out as much as I wanted to. Pretty much that all came to a head. December of 2020, I had a seizure during a video conference call with my work colleagues. And later that day, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. I won't jump too far ahead in the story right now, but really that's what started off my goal to realize, you know what, I need to make a change now. Not happy with what I'm seeing, and with whatever time I do have left, I really want to make an impact. So that led to really two things eventually as a result of that unfortunate happening. One was after my operation, I set out on a fitness journey, which involved the body image issues, as well as founding my story, my company, I should say, more than our story. That was really the trigger that kind of turned on the light, if you will.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing. I want to rewind a little bit, and you had mentioned, that at one point in time, as you were getting involved with career, and as your family was maybe growing and you were evolving, that you had stopped working out, and that you were beginning to struggle with body image and what you were seeing in the mirror. Could you speak a little bit more to that? What were some of the maybe thoughts that were running around in your mind, and how did you maneuver those thoughts as they were entering into your mind as well?
God, it's hard to say for sure because I wasn't really aware of it as it was occurring. It was kind of one day I looked in the mirror and I went, not happy. Um, I was aware that I was not getting to the gym as often as I would have liked to, and starting a family, working crazy career. Obviously you don't have that time and flexibility, so I wasn't able to necessarily eat the way I wanted to, or train as hard or as often as I originally did. So it was really just a kind of a gradual decline, I guess. And I wouldn't say the way I viewed myself, but the way I was able to manage myself. And yeah, it kind of just gradually started to slide from that point. You know, as a father, you can't necessarily say, "Oh, I'll get up at 6 a.m. and hit the gym," because I had other things I was meant to be doing. So yeah, it was an eventual slide into a less favorable body image and more of putting it on the back burner, telling myself, "Oh, I'll get back into shape. I'll find time next week." Eventually, that turned into next month, and then next year, and it was pretty tough on me mentally.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a couple of really important points here that I often think about. I mean, I am not a parent myself, but I'd love to be a parent someday. And I think it makes sense, right? Once you have children, that priorities change, and the amount of time that you would typically have to be engaged in movement, that time gets shifted elsewhere, whether it be to your child. And I mean, you still have to work and you're learning new responsibilities, you're adapting to a new schedule. And so I think that's one thing that I think is really important to kind of put a spotlight on here, as well as when you have parents entering into parenthood, that might create a shift in the how often they might engage in movement, the way that their bodies look, et cetera. And I think it's very natural, I think, for humans, just as an entity living on this planet, to jump into a space of judgment, when they might not be engaging in movement like they have, or they're noticing changes in their body. But I think it's just recognizing that, just as the seasons change, so do we also have seasons of change with our bodies. And so I just really wanted to make sure I put a spotlight onto that, and to just bring attention to that, because I think it's something that, I would imagine a lot of parents who have fitness and wellness being a part of their life prior to having children, might experience after, becoming a parent.
Yeah, and just to add to that, it wasn't for lack of wanting. At the end of the day, you're so tired. It's not possible because you also want to keep that extra energy to spend time with your kids or your wife or your partner or whoever it is that friends, family. It's you got to make sacrifices, and unfortunately, my sacrifice was fitness.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think too, it can really come down to how do we shift our expectations, right? I feel like we have these expectations of ourselves prior to becoming parents. After, of course, you still want fitness to be a part of your life, but how do you maybe shift those expectations that you maybe had of yourself prior to, and make them more realistic for after? And that sounds like it's really challenging, right? Because you only have so much time in a day, you only have so much energy in a day. And then from there it really sounds like prioritizing, okay, I have all of these things to do. What's going to be higher up on my priority list versus what's going to be a little bit lower, and what's the first to go with the amount of time and energy I have in a day. So I know in our conversations that we've had with one another, and even in you introducing yourself, you talked about your diagnosis with incurable brain cancer. So can you just share a little bit more about, what was your response to this diagnosis that you received?
Sure. So the way I found out was kind of over the about a couple weeks span. I started having eyelid twitches, and I was just assuming I'm tired. Um, I started biting my tongue a little bit, and I was assuming I'm just not sleeping. I'm probably having nightmares or something. So I put this all up to just being overworked and tired. It really came to the seizure itself, and the diagnosis of cancer didn't come until after my operation, which was a couple weeks after I had that seizure. My response, personally and emotionally, I never let myself react negatively. I had to stay positive, obviously. It was very profound. Um, I never really considered that I would had to have had brain surgery until the day after my surgery, when a neurosurgeon came in and said, "Look, we're going to have to operate on you. You're going to have to be awake so we can, um, safely resect as much of the tumor as possible because of where it's located." So that there was a lot of stuff to take in, but I always made to ensure that I was calm and looking at it very practically. It wasn't something I was happy about, but it wasn't up to me whether I was happy or not. It was going to happen. So the best I could do was just take it all in stride. And after the surgery, when I was allowed home at first, that was the most troubling, or I could say most difficult time. Post surgery, I was partially paralyzed and I had lost almost all of my speech. So I kind of had to work with various specialists over the next couple months to regain those basic, life tasks. Um, and my first goal, for example, was to walk to the bathroom unassisted. So that was difficult because, as somebody who had been very a perfectionist, career wise, and very fit, very just driven in all aspects of life, going from that to where I ended up was extremely difficult. So I really had to start to learn to give myself some grace when it came to, I'm not going to be able to run a marathon tomorrow. I need to learn to walk down to the end of my driveway first. So it was, those were the hardest times. Um, Gradually, I started regaining some of those life skills, and my memory isn't there, but physically, I'm doing great, and emotionally, I think I'm doing great too. It's really just, it comes down to my positive mindset, which I think I would say has really been the saving grace. My ability to just remain positive throughout this adversity.
Yeah, I truly believe mindset is everything, right? And just, it really sounds like you are learning to meet yourself where you're at, which can also be something that's really difficult to do. Especially, you had mentioned that, you have perfectionist tendencies, right? And that is really hard to do when you have such high expectations of yourself and what you're able to do. But to really be able to maneuver those thoughts, and also the notion of being able to offer yourself grace, in those moments where you might not be living up to, these expectations that you have for yourself, is such an important life skill. And it sounds like being able to do this for yourself and with yourself has really been an integral part of your journey, since your post surgery moments.
It has been. I still struggle with giving myself grace. For example, less than a year after my operation, I ran a half Ironman. So I definitely still have this drive to prove that I'm still capable of doing everything. And I think that's the extremity, like the obsession with fitness part that I know I have. I want to prove that I'm still capable of all of these things. And I think that, like you said, when you're a perfectionist, it's hard to give yourself grace. I've been learning, trying to do that. Um, just I think it was less than 2 weeks ago, I completed another half Ironman, and I had to cancel the end of year race I had planned. It was a full Ironman. I had to just realize that, you know, I'm expecting too much of myself, too much of my body. And with the ongoing chemotherapy that I'm undergoing currently, it wasn't possible. So it was very hard for me to do that. But I just had to learn to go easier on myself and know that it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. A question I have for you is, how do you maybe navigate those moments where you notice there is an obsession, like you had just mentioned, maybe about your fitness journey or things like that. How do you take that awareness that you have surrounding it, um, and work with that?
It's tough. So training and my fitness journey, it's not all bad. It's actually been a very beneficial part of my recovery and my positive mindset. But I also realize that sometimes I'm pushing too hard. Like it's just I don't know. It's finding that fine balance between um, balancing the feel good endorphins that I get from working out and trying to accomplish my goals. It kind of use it as a way to forget about this monster growing inside of me. But I also, I don't know, it's being difficult because I'm conscious. I'm very aware that this thing is an obsession. But I also want to kind of prove to everybody while I'm still here that I'm capable of doing it. I think the biggest thing I struggle with is um, training like 6 days a week, multiple hours a day. I get hungry, I eat a lot, but I haven't seen a lot of change in the mirror. And you know, you'd think you'd be noticeably a lot skinnier after that much training, but I tell myself, it's probably the medications I'm on. So it's this delicate dance between obsession and trying to tell myself every day that I'm my body's remarkable and that it's still here. Give yourself a bit of a break. And I've the last year, I'd say, I'm starting to figure out that I'm starting to like what I see in the mirror.
That's awesome. There are so many parts of what you just shared that I want to dissect. I think the first being, when we enter into the space of fitness and wellness, right? Everyone's journey with it is so incredibly individualized. And so I think what was coming up for me, and when I was hearing you talk about, okay, well, you had used the words that I loved, was like, it's a delicate dance. with fitness here of, how do you balance, those feel good endorphins and kind of meeting where your body is at and balance that with the intensity of your training when you are training for these half Ironmans. And I think both can exist. I truly do think both can exist because, I think, if you are training with a goal in mind of meeting a specific time for your half Ironman, or things like that, naturally, it makes sense that there might be some workout sessions that might seem more rigorous in nature and leave your body feeling a little bit more depleted than if you set out maybe just, okay, I want to get through this. I just want to feel good doing it. So to me, that makes sense of why that's a dance because it's so individualized. I think there is absolutely nothing wrong, entering into the health and wellness space of having goals, right, related to movement. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Where I think there becomes a problem is if you enter into the space of health and wellness solely focusing on the maybe physical transformation that might come because of this increased movement, and having that be the reason why you are engaging in movement and having that be like the crux of it, then I think that's when we can begin to enter into maybe a little bit more of that red flag territory of, am I engaging in movement for the right reasons? And so I think it's okay, right, where I keep going back to these two words you mentioned, the delicate dance. And so that makes 100% sense as to why that might feel difficult to navigate at times, especially when you are in um, those moments of training for your races. Um, there was another part to, when you were just talking right there of just awareness as a whole. And I think awareness is key in any of this work that we do. And so I think it's fantastic that you have this sense of self-awareness of, when might I be pushing too hard and when might I need to dial it back. So many times I think for example, I can speak to my own experience here, but when I was really in the depths of struggling with my eating disorder and with body image, I was so out of tune with any signs that my body was giving me that I maybe needed to pause and take a step back. Because you just learn to shut all of those cues off and you learn to not trust your body at all. And it's that disordered eating voice or eating disorder voice that sneaks into the picture here and tries to say, no, you're fine. Keep pushing harder. Keep pushing harder. So it sounds like for you, that's not the case, though, where you have this new sense of awareness and you're really leaning into that self-awareness to really, maybe help you maneuver those more moments where you're like, what do I do, right, heading into a training session. So a question I have for you then is, if you were to think about, body neutrality, body acceptance, body positivity, do you feel like you resonate with one of those terms right now with where you're at on your own journey with your body?
I'd say it's all over the map. One day I could be happy with what I see. The next day I will be not happy in the slightest. So it's not a constant state. It's definitely ebbing and flowing.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that. And I think that's just the nature of body image in a way in and of itself too is, you know, I still struggle with body image from time to time. And so, I think it's a big accomplishment, I think, for those that maybe don't view their bodies positively to enter into the space of even body neutrality, right? Like that was such a big accomplishment for myself when I really was struggling with the way that my body looked. Some days I'm like, I love my body. I'm very body positive. And then there are other days where I'm like, okay, I just feel neutral about my body. And so, yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head right there with it's a daily thing. So I'm really curious to know, uh, how else has your overall, maybe approach to life or, um, you know, things like that. How has that changed your perspective, um, moving forward with life, living with incurable brain cancer?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I've really learned that, obviously it's a life changing diagnosis, and it's about finding a balance between acknowledging challenges and embracing your life. As I said, staying positive is huge. Always look for happiness. Learn to embrace every moment. Not only possible, but it's necessary to truly having a happy life living with cancer. Having a strong support network around you, practicing self care and mindfulness, setting realistic goals, they're also necessary to living a happy life. Celebrating milestones, seeking professional help is a big one, at least for myself. Like, I wouldn't want to ever, like, I listen to my doctors. That's exactly what I mean by that. And it's not just for my life when it comes to cancer. For those people that are having struggles, if it's whatever it is, if it's a mental or emotional issue or anything, I think seeking professional help should be one of the first things you do. And really, it's just it's a journey. It's not a destination. So each day offers its own opportunities to find happiness.
Yeah, that was so very beautifully worded right there. Um, so I'm curious to know, I feel like this would be the perfect segue for us to kind of enter into having a little bit more conversation about more than our story. But, at what point in your journey did you found more than our story? Um, and how does this fit into your big picture?
I was talking to my friend Jane, who was also diagnosed with brain cancer and was operated on by the same neurosurgeon at the exact same hospital as I was. Shout out to Dr. Sunit Das at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto, Canada. It's when I was talking with her and we were sharing our experiences, it was so cathartic. There was something to it that really connected us and made me feel empowered. And I felt like I wasn't alone in this. And that's when I first got the idea to help others. And the way I could do that wasn't by sharing my own story, it was by giving people a platform to share their stories. These aren't people that were like diagnosed with some terrible disease or overcame some great obstacle. It's their story and their resilience and how they overcame those adversities, and it's what makes them what I like to call the everyday heroes. And sharing stories, it really connects us, promotes personal growth. When we hear people sharing and speaking authentically and candidly about their own challenges, we realize that we're not alone in our struggles. Um, Together, we are stronger. And it really, I hope to help people find their inner resilience through sharing these stories. We all have them, they often define who we are. Too often, we conceal them. The levity that comes through unburdening that emotional baggage and being vulnerable. It's so helpful. It removes the isolation for the person going through that struggle. It's really creating a support network that it's liberating. We need to normalize granting ourselves permission to be imperfect and extend that permission to others. I guess the segue I could drop in here would be I've learned that myself along my own fitness journey as I've been looking in the mirror, learning to grant myself permission to not be okay. And it's really through talking to other people and hearing their own challenges that I've learned to understand this. And it's also given me access to language and just to process my feelings in ways that I was unaware of. So I think analogy that together we're stronger is really just the crux of this. I really just want people to know that I guess ultimately um, you think you may have it bad, but talk to somebody, open up, and you'll be surprised at how much we have in common, and you're gonna feel better. It's an innate thing to want to reach out and share.
Yeah, and what a beautiful platform and legacy you are creating and will be leaving. I had the opportunity to come on and to share a little bit of my story, and we were able to have a wonderful conversation, about my own lived experiences with my eating disorder and with the advocacy work that I'm doing now. And you know the platform you created is just so beautiful, right? For even me to have that space to come on and share my story, which I haven't done a whole lot of recently, but to enter back into that space, I feel like you learn a little bit more and more about your own story, right? It's amazing how you can, no matter how many times you tell your story, you might remember a little nugget that you haven't remembered prior to. And just the power of maybe recognizing, wow, I completely forgot about that part of my story, but yet it's so integral to my own journey as I maneuver whatever it is. And that's why I started my advocacy work and this podcast as well, as I'm such a firm believer in, why you do this work as well. For that exact same reason of how can we create spaces for people to release that shame and guilt that they carry with those struggles that they experience on a daily basis. Because I don't know about you, but that's just part about being a human, right? It's very impossible to get from the moment you were born to the moment you leave this earth to say you've never struggled with anything, right? Like that's eh, I'd like to meet someone who hasn't experienced struggle, because they can consider themselves very lucky. But I think I am just so, it's very inspirational, I think, to be in space with another individual such as yourself, who has the same mission of creating a safe and supportive community, to uplift others and to let them know that they are more than their struggles and that it's okay to struggle. So I think this leads me into this question I have for you. But now that you are in the seat of being able to share your story with other people, what are you hoping that people are hearing as you share your story? If you were to think about maybe one or two messages, of what you want people to take away from this conversation in your story, um, what might some of those be?
So I might have a few things to say. First would be reach out to people. For anybody dealing with a challenging situation, you're not alone. Reach out to your support network and share. You'll find out that people have a lot more in common with each other than we think. Everybody hurts, as you just pointed out. Asking for help is nothing to be ashamed or feel ashamed of. It's not a sign of weakness. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's courageous. Being vulnerable takes bravery, and we all actually have that in us. So embrace your own courage and reach out to people. The other thing I'd say would be I made alluded to this earlier. Life is not a journey; it's a destination. Don't hang up on the what ifs or I should have done that. Kind of mentality. Live life looking through the windshield, not the rear view mirror. Take your learnings and move on. And the other one would be laugh. Take yourself. Don't go so hard on yourself. Express yourself. Just maintain a sense of humor and smile. It goes a long way in every aspect, every facet of life. If you stop taking yourself so darn seriously, you'll actually have fun and you'll realize, oh man, I'm smiling. I'm you know what? It's just it's an extra 5 pounds I wish I didn't have. So what? And just laugh it off. Not often the easiest to do, but if you just embrace that outlook and approach to life, it'll be a lot easier.
Yeah, that was really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Before we end our time here together, I've heard you mention the word embrace quite a number of times. Um, and the title of this podcast is called Embracing You. How has this journey you've been on allowed you to not only embrace yourself, but along with that, how does the work that you do with More Than Our Story allow others to embrace themselves as well?
So, in terms of myself, I think my own journey's given me perspective and purpose. I would never say I wish I never got cancer because the perspective part is it's given me, confronting your own mortality is quite a heavy thing, but it's also very transformative. And now I'm so at peace that there's really a comfort in that. It's also given me purpose because without cancer, I'd still be that consultant, overstressed, overeating, overworking. I would never have started MTOS or renewed my fitness journey and my body positivity journey. I think for other people, it's really just to echo what I said earlier. It's really about breaking down barriers and stigmas. Something I said earlier, granting yourself the permission to be imperfect is truly what encapsulates embracing yourself. You are stronger than you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Daniel, if people are wanting to learn more about More Than Our Story and the work that you do, where can people find you?
So morethanOurstory.com. That's one word.com. You can also reach me at Daniel at morethanOurstory.com. Or if you go to my Instagram page, which is at More Than Our Story, there's a link tree that's got all the other ways that you can reach me.
Awesome. And I will be sure to include that in the show notes for this episode so people can access those should they want to learn more, which they should, because the work that you're doing is just, it's so beautiful. It's so incredible. And I think what's most beautiful about it is how you've taken your own struggle and are wanting to make a positive difference for others and to create a safe healing space for others, which I think is such a true testament to who you are as an individual who lives life with so much integrity um, and compassion. I think it's very clear that you are such a kind, caring person who just wants to uplift others on whatever journey they may be on. So I want to thank you, Daniel, not only for your time here today and you sharing your story with our audiences, but just overall for all that you're doing for so many people in this world.
Thank you very much, Eric. And I just want to say the work you're doing too. I think it speaks volumes to the authenticity and vulnerability that you speak from and advocate from. That gives your message and your platform so much truth. And again, congratulations for being chosen for the walk ambassador in the for the Minnesota Nita Walk.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. I truly believe that, we're in this work together. And it takes more than just two. to really to create this ripple effect. But I am incredibly grateful to have one more person in my corner now to really help create this hopefully large scale, more wide scale effect of entering into the space of vulnerability and what that can do for mind, body, and soul. So once again, I thank you so much, Daniel, and I look forward to connecting again soon.
My pleasure. Have a wonderful day.
Once again, I would like to give a big thank you to Daniel for being a guest on the Embracing You podcast today, and for him just sharing his own story just so freely and with loads of vulnerability. A reminder that if you're interested in following along with Daniel and the work that he does with More Than Our Story, the link to follow along can be found in the show notes for today's episode. So until next time, I hope you all continue to grant yourselves grace as we transition from season to season. I hope that you find time to connect with yourself, with your soul, and with others. And most importantly, I hope you continue to remind yourself of your innate worth. Much love.